I'm Eva Pilgrim. Thanks for streaming with us. Incredibly graphic testimony today in the Sean Diddy Combs trial. And we have to warn you, some of what you hear may...
Sean Diddy Combs has just been sentenced to 160 years behind bars. You heard that right, 160. The courtroom fell silent when the final tally came down. No one moved. Diddy didn't cry, didn't plead, didn't even blink. But make no mistake, this wasn't some symbolic gesture. This was the gavel of the American justice system hitting harder than anyone expected. This isn't just a prison term, it's a professional erasure. The kind of punishment reserved not for missteps or moral failings, but for something much darker and longer buried. This was a slow motion detonation that finally went off. One built from years of whispers, lawsuits, closed-door settlements, and now a legal reckoning that reads more like a novel than a court docket.
Well, the things that I experienced with him were monster-like. That stuff almost destroyed my life.
They tried everything. His lawyers working around the clock, scrambling through federal guidelines like Wall Street quants, pleaded for leniency. They floated sentences of 5 years, maybe 10 at most. They whispered behind closed doors about plea deals. Rumors even floated that Diddy would name names, hand over the skeletons hiding in the VIP lounges, back offices, and silent studios. And some insiders claimed there was talk of illicit accomplices, enablers, powerful co-conspirators whose own masks might crack if Diddy decided to sing. But it didn't matter. Not to Judge Subramanian, not to the prosecution, not to the survivors in the gallery or the nation watching with popcorn and disgust. The gavel came down, and it came with a message. No more escape for the man who once declared himself the king. What happened behind the scenes of that courtroom was more than law, it was theater, and it was war. For weeks, Diddy's team paraded legal muscle. They spun him not as a predator, but as a broken man with a wild past and bad taste in company. They leaned into the spectacle, hoping perhaps the jury would separate the man from the myth. They even succeeded on some counts. Not guilty of racketeering, not guilty of trafficking. But that didn't matter when 2 Mann Act violations were enough to flip his world upside down. Each carried a potential 10-year sentence. Multiply that, stack them, add enhancements the judge hinted at like obstruction, witness intimidation, prior civil settlements, and the twisted scope of what was described as commercial coercion. And suddenly, those small charges had teeth, and those teeth bit down hard.
How many people came through his orbit? How many people could this have happened to? And how did he get away with it for so long?
But let's get into the twist that's gripping the industry right now. Cassie Ventura, the ex-girlfriend, once the princess of Diddy's Mansion Palace empire, now rumored to be the queen on the prosecution's chessboard. The whispers are deafening. Did she cut a secret deal? One source close to the U.S. Attorney's Office insists that Ventura's testimony was more than voluntary, that she had incentive, protection, and a plan. On paper, she appeared as a brave survivor, giving emotional, raw testimony about being forced into those infamous freak-off sessions. But peel back a layer, and it starts to look calculated. Cassie's lawsuit last year, settled in under 24 hours, raised eyebrows. But what if that wasn't the end of her story? What if that was her first move in something much bigger? Because when she took the stand, 9 months pregnant, calm, composed, and specific, something shifted. Prosecutors leaned in, the defense squirmed. Her 4-day testimony painted a picture of a man who wasn't just obsessed with control, but willing to sacrifice anyone in his orbit to keep his legend untarnished. And according to at least one legal analyst, her appearance sealed the psychological conviction long before the legal one. The defense tried to cast doubt, even used text messages to make her look complicit. But the jury saw something else, someone who had endured, who had cracked, and then come back for precision. And if the rumors are true, she didn't just come back for truth, she came back for leverage.
Referred to me as Wild King Nights. And what a Wild King Night was when him and a guest would go to a hotel room or be at his home, his bedroom, and they would have intimate gatherings. I would have to go and prep that hotel room, which consisted of baby oil, Astroglide.
Insiders from Diddy's former camp say that around the time her lawsuit was filed, there was a shift in his behavior. He stopped calling certain people, he stopped showing up in LA. Some claim he knew what was coming. Others say he didn't think she'd actually flip. After all, Cassie knew everything. The parties, the cameras, the entertainment. If someone were to write the manual on how Diddy's dark empire worked, it would have been her ghostwritten memoir. But instead of a book, we got a testimony. And according to one former Bad Boy Records executive, that testimony was the key to the vault. But betrayal, if that's what it was, didn't stop with Cassie. There's a darker rumor now swirling, one that's sending shivers through the music industry's old guard, that members of Diddy's inner circle were quietly feeding the feds long before the trial even began. The extortion plot, they're calling it. A theory, unconfirmed, whispered in high-end lounges and private Discord channels, that several former employees and business partners may have turned state's evidence to save themselves. Could it be that Diddy's own house staff, the ones who ordered the cars, booked the flights, even handled the black pouches rumored to be full of party supplies, were the ones who lit the match?
I thought he was this clean businessman who rise to the top because he was such a powerful and smart, educated man. I had no idea that he had this other side to him. And when I started to get exposed to his lifestyle, I started to really realize, like, this guy has an addiction. It's not just, once every few weeks, it's every day, every hour.
One of his ex-bodyguards who spoke on Background hinted that a core group of longtime employees had been under federal watch since at least early 2023. A former road manager, now relocated to Atlanta, told a blogger in April that subpoenas had been flying around like confetti. This is true. It's not just that Diddy was betrayed, it's that he was under siege from people he trusted to hold his secrets. People who once helped stage his birthday parties, now testifying about blackmail schemes and videotapes stored in private vaults. And then there's the strange silence from so many of his former industry friends. Not a single public statement from top-tier collaborators. No high-profile legal fundraisers. No public showings of solidarity beyond a few free puff shirts and heavily oiled influencers outside the Manhattan courthouse. Why? Some say it's self-preservation, some say it's guilt. Others say it's fear that whatever he was convicted of, the deeper story hasn't even hit the light yet.
It was like, wow, for Diddy? What? That was a person that I looked up to, the mogul. And I listened to all the artists that he made superstars. And so to have a chance to be able to be signed to him, it was amazing. It was like, oh my God, I'm here. I finally did it.
One juror, speaking anonymously, told reporters after the trial he was fighting for himself, but he was alone. Alone. That's a word that didn't used to fit Sean Combs. Not in the 90s, not in the 2000s, not even 5 years ago. But alone is how he stood when the sentence was read. Alone is how he waits now, behind bars, stripped of power, influence, and, if the rumors are true, stripped by the very people he made rich, famous, and loyal. Or so he thought. And as the last echoes of the gavel faded into the cold walls of that courtroom, the most haunting moment wasn't the sentence, it was the judge's words. With a steady voice that cut sharper than any headline, Judge Arun Subramanian declared Sean Combs a danger to society. He didn't say it in passing. He said it with weight, with purpose, staring straight at a man once hailed as untouchable. According to legal observers present during the sentencing, the judge leaned heavily on the idea that Diddy had used his wealth and influence to destroy lives, and those lives, stacked in court files, behind sealed depositions, and in whispered testimonies, were the real evidence. The verdict may have been about transporting people for private acts, but the sentence, that was about something bigger: control, manipulation, and the unchecked power of celebrity.
They've been afraid of coming forward. They've been afraid of what he could potentially do to them within the industry, what he could do to them professionally, maybe even personally. And so yes, it's been a dark secret they've held on to for a very, very long time.
What we saw wasn't just a conviction, it was a recalibration, a line drawn in the sand by the justice system signaling that even men with private jets, billion-dollar portfolios, and Grammy Awards aren't immune to consequence. Legal insiders say the severity of Diddy's sentence wasn't merely about punishment, it was about precedent. Because behind the courtroom drama and tabloid frenzy, something else is happening. This could very well be the moment the industry's old guard starts to crumble. A silent warning to the other titans of entertainment whose secrets are still buried behind mansion gates and NDAs. The days of buying silence, weaponizing loyalty, and rewriting history with hush money may finally be over. But if that wasn't enough to make your jaw tighten, let's talk about one of the strangest, most disturbing details that crawled out from the underbelly of this entire case: the baby oil. Yes, that seemingly innocent item has become a chilling symbol. Repeated throughout witness statements and backed by visual evidence shown only to the jury, the baby oil wasn't just background texture in Diddy's bizarre world, it was ritual. A former assistant testified that dozens of bottles were stocked like trophies in hotel suites, penthouses, and even his studio compound. They were used not for skincare or vanity, but to orchestrate control, to dehumanize, to turn moments into performances and bodies into props.
He cornered me. And then he asked me, with his arm up, he asked me, "How you doing?" I'm kind of like, wow, what the heck? Very uncomfortable. And then he rubbed his hand down my breast He said, if you need anything at all, you let me know.
Prosecutors described it as a recurring element of power dynamics, and the press understandably latched on. Social media erupted, with some calling it the oil signature, a grotesque calling card of a man who allegedly turned private encounters into staged showcases. The term freak-off may have drawn snickers at first, but in court it landed like a punch. Witnesses described entire rooms, dimly lit, soundproofed, where guests were instructed, sometimes coerced, to participate in scenes orchestrated to satisfy Diddy's voyeuristic demands. And in almost every retelling, the oil was there. Some said it was poured deliberately, some said it was used as currency, some said it was demanded. Whatever the case, it became a symbol not of pleasure, but of power. And now, in the fallout, it's everywhere. Bottles were found during the March 2024 raids at both his LA mansion and Miami's Star Island compound. One investigator reportedly referred to the search scene as sterile, but sticky. Dozens of unused bottles lined like decor, as if waiting for the next session that never came. Forensic experts took samples, but what they uncovered wasn't scientific, it was psychological. A pattern, an obsession. A man clinging to rituals that blurred the line between performance and pathology.
I'm sorry, I'm just I'm in this moment right now. This is crazy. Sorry. People don't really know how much what it does to you when something that you love is taken from you and thrown away like it don't even matter, and then they move on with their lives and you're stuck. You're stuck during those years. You're still stuck 21 years later.
Which brings us to where things stand now. Because if you thought this trial closed the book, think again. Diddy's sentencing may have been historic, but it was only criminal court. What's coming next could be even more devastating. There are still over 60 civil lawsuits pending, many filed by anonymous individuals, many invoking the same language, the same scenes, the same chilling patterns. These cases range from alleged coercion to manipulation, and even more damning from people who claim they were teenagers when it happened. Civil lawyers are circling like sharks, and the courtroom is only one battlefield. The industry is the other. But before we accept the trial's outcome as a clean win for justice, we have to ask, how free was that jury? Really? Because behind the wood-paneled walls and legal posturing, there's growing chatter that the 12 men and women who decided Diddy's fate were under intense, perhaps even unnatural pressure. While the verdict landed heavy, it didn't come from a vacuum. The media coverage was relentless. Public protests, social media campaigns, even late-night monologues cast Diddy as either a fallen icon or a monster in designer shoes, and every one of those narratives, consciously or not, made its way into the jury room. We're not just talking about opinions here, we're talking about atmosphere, the kind that fogs up objectivity, even when everyone swears they're just following the evidence.
I want to start with alleged victim number 4. Who goes by the name Mia. It's an alias. She is one of the people who is testifying where the judge has granted her anonymity. She is on the stand, but everybody in the courtroom has been warned. Do not reveal her identity. Do not even give a physical description.
Some legal analysts have pointed out that this case was always about more than evidence. It was about symbolism, about the slow dismantling of a persona built on untouchable bravado. And when a defendant walks into court with decades of cultural weight on his shoulders, the jurors aren't just judging a man, they're judging a myth. The emotional toll of sitting through weeks of graphic testimony, all while being silently watched by the press, the public, and 1,000 unsleeping comment sections is incalculable. That tension, that awareness that every decision would be dissected in real time across every major platform, created a high-stakes theater no jury training could prepare them for. Adding to the complication was the delicate dance prosecutors performed in open court. They avoided direct appeals to emotion, but layered their strategy with subtle cues, a well-placed pause here, a pointed photograph there, reinforcing not just facts, but a mood. Several observers noted that the closing arguments seemed more cinematic than procedural, blurring the line between closing statement and cultural indictment. Was it effective? Absolutely. But the question lingers, did it nudge the scales of fairness just enough to tip them? When you choreograph a narrative that powerful, even subconsciously, the risk isn't that the jury doesn't believe you, it's that they feel like they have to.
So she testified, excuse me, that she was Diddy's ex-assistant. She said he her, sexually assaulted her in various ways multiple times. He exacted unbelievable violence against her, threatened her. At one point, allegedly threatened to take her phone and use anything on the phone.
And it's not just the media or the prosecution that created this heat. The courthouse itself became a stage. Outside those doors, supporters and protesters camped for days. Homemade t-shirts, baby oil theatrics, influencer live streams with hashtags ready to go. Jurors couldn't avoid it. Not entirely. Even if they turned off their phones, avoided coverage, they still walked past that circus every single morning. And that has a psychological effect. It reminds them that the trial isn't just about what's on the record, it's about history, perception, and whether they want to be the 12 who let a powerful man walk free after everything they heard. We'll probably never know what really tipped the scale behind those closed deliberation doors. Was it the evidence? The emotion? The collective weight of a nation staring them down? All we know is this. One alternate juror told reporters he understood the verdict, but admitted the case had doubt laced through it from the start. And if the deliberations were even half as complicated as the culture surrounding them, then we're left with an uncomfortable truth. Justice may have been served, but was it entirely free of influence, or just the best possible version under impossible pressure?
Same kind of extortion that we heard when Cassie took the stand and testified on that airplane ride back from France. Diddy said, "You don't do a freak-off, I'm going to release one of the freak-off videos that you are profiled in and humiliate you."
Former collaborators have gone radio silent. The fashion deals are suspended. Music streaming platforms, while still hosting his catalog, are quietly reevaluating algorithm placement. Meanwhile, activist groups are calling for a broader audit, not just of Diddy's behavior, but of how many within the industry allegedly enabled it. Booking agents, managers, security personnel. How many people saw the signs and stayed quiet? How many signed NDAs to protect a brand instead of a person? And then there's Allie Carter. Her claims, dismissed by some as sensational, now sit in a very different light. She wasn't the only one to mention tunnels, secret gatherings, or high-profile names whispered in dark rooms. And while the ritualistic elements of her testimony remain unproven, the tone she struck, the idea of performance masking abuse, matches up uncomfortably well with the courtroom revelations. Whether fact, fear, or something in between, her voice is part of a growing chorus that believes this wasn't an isolated case, it was a system.
So we just got this new audio from the Diddy trial, and it is pretty explosive. This is audio of a voicemail that Diddy left to the Jane Doe who's been testifying in this trial for the last couple days. And he sounds really annoyed. He's talking about her maybe giving him the silent treatment, and his response is, "I got a busy life. I can't be dealing with your silent treatment, and we got to keep it."
Let's also not forget that this verdict has reignited broader conversations about what justice looks like for survivors, especially those who go up against public figures with deep pockets and even deeper legal benches. Advocates are calling Diddy's sentence both a victory and a warning. But others say it's not enough, that the real accountability comes not from time served, but from cultural memory. Will fans remember the music or the trial? The empire or the aftermath? Meanwhile, Cassie's role in this still isn't fully understood. She's made no further public statements since the trial concluded, but sources close to her say she's preparing for the civil phase. Attorneys for other victims have praised her for speaking out, and there's talk that she could be pivotal again, either as a witness in future cases or simply as a symbol that helped topple one of music's longest-standing giants. But behind all this, the questions only multiplied. If Diddy went down, who else knew? Who else participated? And more importantly, who's next? As one former industry insider told Rolling Stone, he wasn't the only one throwing those parties, not by a long shot. So now we turn to you. Do you think this was justice served or just the opening shot in a much larger storm? Is this the end of an empire or the beginning of something even darker? Let us know what you think in the comments. Stay curious, stay sharp, and until next time, keep your eyes open. Some truths only surface when the music stops.